Alright, so this past week I've kind of had the urge to restore some of my axes. I had three axe heads that were unhung. Actually, two of them were unhung, one of them was hung, but the handle kind of crapped out on me, so I took it off there and I had these three heads, and now I wanted to go ahead and replace the handles. On two of them already I've replaced the handles, and the third one I'm actually going to share that process with you. This is just my opinion on how I like to replace my axe heads. If you go online, there's a ton of information out there. Everybody has a different way or preference of doing it. Everything from using a belt sander to a hand file to just sandpaper to properly fit it. And then when you're driving the wedges in, there's all different opinions on what types of wood to use for the wedge, if you're supposed to use glue or oil, or if you're supposed to keep it bare. And then those last shims that you put in there, some people use triangles, some people use the circular ones. So it's really based on preference and what works best for you, and I'm going to share with you what works best for me. So, again, I already told you that I had two of them pretty much done. The last thing I need to do is drive that final shim in there, and they came out real nice. So, third one, where is it? I have a lot going on here. I have a lot of cool projects coming up, so stay in tune with me. But this is the axe head that I plan to do today. It is a Collins Legitimus axe. And story behind this axe is it was originally on this handle here, and I bought it at a yard sale for $5. Jeez, probably 2 years ago now. And great investment. It was a little loose when I got it, but I was able to tighten it up, and it worked pretty good for about a year and a half. But now it's time to obviously restore it. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to purchase a handle. Now, with axe heads, with standard size axe heads, this is probably a 2 or 3 pounder. You have the option of using like a 36-inch handle, which is a 3-footer, or a 24-inch handle, which is a 2-foot handle. For this axe, I'm going to go with a 36-inch handle. And when purchasing these handles, you can find them all over. You can find them online. The first set of handles I purchased ever for doing axes, I purchased them online, and I kind of regret that. The issue with purchasing axe handles online is there's a lot of things that you need to look for within the handle, and when you're purchasing an axe handle online, you're kind of limited to what they give you, and quite often the manufacturers of these handles don't really understand how the handles need to be oriented in order for them to be the strongest that they can be. So when I pick up a handle, there's a couple main things that I'm looking for. One, especially around the head area, I'm ensuring that it's the white sapwood. You don't want to use this darker colored wood. To get these handles, I went through 3 different hardware stores, 2 hardware stores and Home Depot. Actually, the local hardware store had the best price. Can you believe that? So shop local. But anyway, this handle, especially around the head, you want to make sure that it's that white sapwood, because this other wood, this is harder wood, and it has a tendency to crack easier, and it's just not as ideal. The reason I chose this handle, though, it is okay, because around the head it's all sapwood. It's just you have a little bit of hardwood on the handle here, but that's really not going to affect anything. So I'm not concerned about that. It actually looks kind of cool. So yeah. And then in addition to making sure that you have pretty much an all sapwood handle, you want to just inspect it, make sure there's no like cracks that may be hiding in there, any kind of things that may cause the handle to fail prematurely. And then finally, one of the most important things is you want to look at the grain orientation. And when I say grain orientation, if you understand how a tree grows, it grows in rings. And when you have those rings stacked vertically, when you're exerting force up and down, you want those growth rings stacked vertically, because that's how the wood withholds the most amount of strength. If you have the growth rings going sideways on this handle, it's going to be much weaker, and the handle again is going to fail rather prematurely. So let me see if I can get a good shot of the grain orientation, which, as you can see, the grain goes vertically along this handle. And ideally you want it perfectly vertically, but this one's off just a touch, but not a big deal. I'm fairly confident that this is going to hold up over time. So yeah, so that's really what you want to look for within the handle. And then, of course, your axe head, you just want to inspect it. You want to make sure that this eye is not all collapsed or deformed or anything like that. We are going to shine this axe head up coming up in a little while. And yeah, so how I go about this is the first thing I do is I start to fit the axe head onto the handle. And this one I'm actually fairly fortunate. This one is really not going to require much work at all. On the other two, I spent a lot of time fitting the head to this handle. But this one has a pretty good fit already. It's very unlikely that this will be the case most often. So some of the tools that I find are the best to use when it comes to properly working this head down to fit the shape of your axe eye is a Farrier Rasp. Now, lucky enough, those of you that follow the channel know that I went to Farrier School out in Indiana a couple of years ago. And these Farrier Rasps are excellent tools for working down this wood. This is a hard hickory handle, but these rasps really go through it quite nicely. A little word about rasps real quick. I mean, you can pick these up at Tractor Supply. The only issue with Tractor Supply is the rasps that they're most likely going to carry are the Diamond brand, which Diamond brand, they're kind of like the lower quality in the Farrier industry. So I do have a Diamond brand. It doesn't cut near as aggressively as my what is this called? I think this is a Red Tang. Stand by. Yes, Red Tang rasp made by Heller. They're pretty expensive rasps. I mean, they're 25, 30 bucks a pop, but they are excellent tools. They have a coarse side and then they have a fine side, and you also have a file on the edges, so very useful. And then I also keep a smaller hand file. This one's kind of dull. It's like a little Chinese one. It has semi-round contour on there. I also like to keep a chainsaw file with me, and of course I have some sandpaper laying around here somewhere. And yeah, those are the main tools I use to work this head down. And also one of the tools that I find most helpful when you're fitting an axe head to an axe handle is having some type of wooden or plastic mallet. Because when you're fitting this on here, you'll see in the process in a minute how it actually fits on there, and you need to keep taking that axe head off, and you need to keep hitting the handle. And the nice thing about using a wood hammer or mallet, or a plastic hammer or mallet, is it won't dent or mar the surface of the axe head, and it won't really cause damage to your handle. When I first started fitting axe heads onto handles, I used to use just regular steel hammers, and it will damage the surface of the axe, and it will damage your handle, which that's something you don't want. This is something I actually made myself. Granted, it's seen a lot of use, but it's easy enough for me to replace it. This is just a piece of hardwood handle, and this is a piece of ash, actually I got out of my firewood pile. I worked this down into a cube, or excuse me, a rectangle, and I just use this to beat around my axe head, and the damage is done to the head, which I'd much rather have to replace this head as opposed to trying to fix up my axe head. So hopefully that makes sense. And now we're going to go through the first steps of doing this. And the first thing I like to do is I like to remove the stickers from the handle, and I'm going to do that via a razor knife. So I'm just going to take these off, and after I do that, if you notice this handle, it's kind of shiny. It has a light coat of varnish on there, and varnish will make the handle last longer, but it's very uncomfortable in the hand. And what we're going to do, we're going to remove that varnish with a piece of sandpaper, and then when we're all finished with this project, we're going to throw a layer of boiled linseed oil on there, and it makes for a more comfortable feel when you're swinging this tool around. It prevents blisters and actually brings out the color in the wood, makes it pop real nice. It looks kind of rustic. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and start removing these stickers, and I'll sand this down, and then we'll go to the next step. Friggin' hate these stickers. they're extremely difficult to take off. You really got to take them off with a razor knife, and then after, when you get them taken off, they leave this sticky residue behind, and if you were to take your sandpaper right now and try and take it off, it'll gum up your sandpaper. So what I do, I just take the edge of the razor knife, I hold it on a 90-degree angle to my work surface, and I just scrape the goo off. You see it collecting on the blade there. Next thing I got to do is start sanding this. Alright, and that's just roughing it in. And now what we're going to do